Hello there. Thank you for tuning in to the Max and Snack Show. So recently in Arizona, the state has ruled that the victim of a statutory rape case is now basically in debt to their rapist, and they have to pay to the tune of $15,000 in damages. I shouldn't say damages. Child support payments, medical payments, plus 10% interest, which is where the real damage is. And they have to pay all this essentially to the child through the state, really to the parent, the mother of the child. What had happened is that 6 years ago, a 20-year-old had sex with a 14-year-old, which in the state of Arizona is considered statutory rape because in order to consent to sex, you have to be 15 years of age or older. The 20-year-old was convicted of statutory rape, so she is, you know, a legally identified rapist. She had a child from this union between the two and did not tell the 14-year-old at all about this until 6 years later, which is when the story is breaking between the past couple days. So, you know, the state was saying that, you know, we know that, you know, you were 14 years old when it happened and that you were raped, and we are aware that you weren't aware of the child until now, but now you owe $15,000. So essentially the issue here is where's the switch gone wrong? Where's a wire out of place when it comes to just the motherboard of the government of Arizona? I mean, how much of this is a system on autopilot? How much of this is actual, you know, human oversight over this actual issue? I mean, the dude's having his wages garnished by the state. It's non-negotiable. He has to pay $380 out of every check that's coming out. That's every check. And he's even said, too, you know, very nobly, I might add, that he has no problem paying for the child moving forward. But, and I agree with him, he doesn't feel that he should have to pay for 6 years of a life that he wasn't a part of, let alone aware of. What state would justify making a 14-year-old girl rape victim pay their rapist fucking child support at all? First and foremost, let alone after 6 years of not paying for it at all. You know what I mean? Like, by the way, you owe 6 years worth, and you have to pay for the rest of that child's life, or the rest of that child's child years up until they're 18. In my eyes here, this is a definite bias against this guy because he is a guy. I mean, after all, if you're a father, you have to take care of your child, even if you didn't know that they exist. I guess, you know, the state of Arizona is too used to deadbeat dads, and so they have to punish a 14-year-old rape victim. Tell me one situation in which, you know, in the Middle East you read a story about a girl who's being raped and they're now forced to marry their rapist, and sometimes these girls commit suicide because of instances like this. Tell me one scenario where the media or the government has condoned that kind of behavior. You know, basically, they're making this rape victim pay tribute to 6 years of a child's life that he wasn't even aware of. And let alone, I mean, let's say he was aware of it. The dude was a fucking minor. He was a rape victim. As an adult, and he wants to be a part of that child's life and pay for it moving forward, yeah, you know, it's not the child's fault that the child is alive, obviously. So that's fine. But while this dude is still figuring out how to get with girls, still figuring out who he is, hasn't even graduated high school yet, probably, you know, if he's going to college, figuring out where he's going to go, or figuring out if he's going to go at all, figuring out what to do with his life in terms of a job, everything, figuring out how the world works. He's collecting a debt, you know, he's collecting some sort of, he's basically having to amass a certain type of wealth that he doesn't have to pay for a child that came from an unlawful and illegal union that has been deemed rape. Tell me where the sense is in this. Tell me where the logic is in this. How many of you would condone this if this was happening to you? Because I would be just as surprised if I figured out that I have a 6-year-old daughter from when I was raped 6 years ago. And to people who say that because he's a guy, it's not as bad, you know, I have this argument against you. He's 14 years old. There's no way he can make a logical or rational decision concerning sex at all. I mean, when you're 14, you'll fuck a couch. You'll fuck an animal. You'll fuck anything. Anything. So even if that is the case, you know, oh, he's a guy, so he likes sex. It's okay to do that? It's okay to have sex with someone who's not legally allowed to consent? Even if there was no child involved in this picture here, you're telling me that if a fucking 20-year-old man had sex with a 14-year-old girl that the government wouldn't try and punish him to the fullest extent of the law? And if there were a child involved, do you think that they would make the fucking woman pay him child support? No. That wouldn't happen. The justice system claims to be blind when it isn't. I mean, you can't have a system in this country that punishes black men for drug possession with a much harsher crime, sometimes to the fullest extent on first-time offenses for drug possession, not distribution, than a white male or a white female at that fact, just along those lines there, then for the same crime, the same exact crime, you know, the same amount of evidence, same crime, and the black guy gets the harsher sentence. You know, and in cases of alimony, when a husband has to pay alimony, he has to pay more. Or he has to pay it at all. When it comes to child support, guy has to pay it because the child always goes to the mother, even if a court rules that the father is the one who's supposed to be taking care of the child. The mother always gets the child. How can a system be blind when it can't objectively look at the facts and say, yeah, this needs to happen, and it does it every single time for every single person, regardless of your gender, race, or age, or wealth? I mean, I know you guys remember stories about how, you know, when a TARP, I think it was called TARP, when it went through and it bailed all the banks out, you know, the last great thing George W. Bush did, and all the guys who got sentenced got a fucking slap on the wrist. Sometimes they only got probation, and in the cases they only had to go to prison for fucking a year, get off after 6 months of good behavior, and they still get all their retirement funds and checks and shit from their former employers. They're fine. You know, when this kid, 14-year-old kid, is raped and has that unjustly taken, the choice of a child unjustly taken out of his hands, a child that is half his, and he has no choice in the matter whatsoever if that child can live or not, no choice in whatsoever in the first 6 years of his life, or his or her life, when it comes to input and how to raise or develop the child. If he even could, he was fucking 14 to 20 years old, like he would know what the fuck to do. It's obviously a system that is very much biased. You know, it's a little sexist, it's a little racist, it's a little classist, and it's broken, and it needs to be fixed. I cannot look you in the eye and keep a straight face if you try and justify this ruling. You want to justify him paying child support here forward? Go for it. But for the past 6 years, when he was a minor for the majority of those 6 years, of a child he didn't agree to have, in a case of rape? How can you justify that? Be empathetic. Put yourself in his shoes and then say, am I okay with this situation? You know, is this okay? Is this the right thing to do? Question the oversight of, you know, the government of Arizona, and there are a couple other examples as well that the Raw story link that you're going to have in the description goes over just overall, because they found stories on this before as well. You know, like instances in California where a 15-year-old has to pay a 34-year-old in child support because in a state that was ruled statutory rape. Also in Kansas as well, where a 13-year-old in 1993 was made to pay for the same shit when it came to a 17-year-old babysitter who got impregnated by a sexual encounter. You know, these are instances of rape. The child doesn't have the ability to rationally make the decision to have sex with someone who's older, let alone, you know, not be overwhelmed by it. I remember when I was 14, 13, if I were to be approached by a 20-year-old, I wouldn't even know how to handle myself. Ultimately, you know, you need to ask yourself, is this okay? Because if it isn't okay, there needs to be a change. And I know it's hard to believe, but we live in a democracy. And so we have the power to initiate change. And the only way you can initiate change is by getting mad about it and saying something. Not fucking typing on a forum, you know, not voting in an online poll. Protesting. Writing a letter. Calling a representative. These are things that are within our reach, within our grasp, and it's just as simple as just making your voice heard. If you disagree, let them know. Especially if you live in the state of Arizona. It just boils down to we need to have a system that truly is blind. And we need to have a system that's objectively fair. I don't see any issue with taking the scientific method into the courthouse. So really, on that note, I have nothing much more to add to this. Just thank you so much, of course, for watching up until this point. Like if you like, dislike if you don't, and leave a comment if you have something to say. This is Max and Snacks, and get the fuck out of here!